Alright, so I hope this has really whet your appetite for color scripting, because we're going to really dig into this topic and spend some serious time on it during the class. Alright, so we go from color scripting into formal location design. This means we're working out final design that is packaged up and presented to the other ancillary departments that I've mentioned, modeling department and so forth, so that all of our final designs can be created digitally. So let's take a look. As we go into the process of location design, there's still exploration to be done. We've taken an initial pass, an initial look that you've already seen, and have a general feel for the direction we want to go in, and then we start fine-tuning. So we'll do roughs and sketches like this. We know that we want a beach, we know we want giant pillars, we know we want mist. That sort of thing has already been established. But now we need to get a little bit more specific, so more exploration is in order to finalize what those things are going to look like and how they're going to come together. So here's getting even more final. Piece by our art director, Pierre-Olivier Vincent, and these were my value studies here. And then I put these ideas that we got hatched and we got developed, I put them together into a style guide. So we'd worked out the look of the rocks, the feel of the rocks, the texture, surfaces, and so forth. And so I took all that material and I put it together in the form of a style guide showing exactly what these different types of rocks look like: side view, front view, top view. This is a modeling package. This is a piece that is specifically handed from the art department to the modelers so that they can now build it. And then from the modelers, it goes to the surfacers who texture and paint on the surfaces. So this is a modeling package and also a surfacing package as well. We show the context, giving our illustrations and our ideas, photo reference, and some written characteristics to give an overview of what's happening in this image. All right, so some design work on what the houses will look like in How to Train Your Dragon. Beautiful renderings by Emil Maitev here. And I'll tell you, these artists, they deserve credit. And I will tell you, if I remember and if I know who the artist was, I'll let you know, because this is just such beautiful work. We've got to give credit where credit is due. And interior design by Christian Kawamura. And then some modeling work done. I'm going to talk about this in a moment, because modeling is becoming more and more an important part of the actual visual development process, not just set design that comes at a later time. So I'm going to talk to you about that specifically. Here's Christian Schellewald doing final design work in the locations for Kung Fu Panda. You've got to know what a tree looks like. If someone's going to build that tree, if it's going to be modeled, if it's going to have final design, you've got to have all these specifics. And Christian, as an art director, knows how these things have to relate to each other and be designed. So we have a breakdown so that it's numbered, and you have the top view so you know which is which, so the modelers can easily translate that. So you have a sketch like this. And that sketch by Henrik Tam is painted into a scene like this, painted by Bill Kaufman. Sketch by Christian Schellewald and painted by Richard Daskis. And someone's got to do all the elevations for this stuff. This is an important part of the design and development process. It's a critical part of location design, to have actual location elevations, architectural renderings drawn up, because some of these things have to be designed exactly. You have Shrek's carriage, for instance. which is much larger than a human carriage. Well, if you have some kind of a bridge or some kind of an archway over the street, guess what? You have to know that Shrek's carriage can actually travel through and fit in it. Otherwise, you'll get all the way down the pipeline. All this stuff has been modeled, rendered, and then two elements will crash together. And this sort of thing happens all the time. And then stuff has to be re-rendered, redesigned, restructured. It's incredibly expensive. So this stuff is carefully and exactly has careful and exact set elevation, so these kinds of problems don't happen down the road. So if this is your cup of tea, there is a place for you in the art department. Alright, so you'll notice I have called out location design once again, because there's an additional aspect of location design that I want to address here, and that is what we call a style painting, or we might also call it a movie moment painting. This is meant to be a painting that isn't just location design, it isn't just the grass, the building, and so forth. It's actually meant to be a descriptive of the story moment that happens within the location. This is a selling point. This is something that's put up in the studio where the director is meant to approve it, the executive producer is meant to approve it, the head of the studio looks at it and is meant to approve it. This is, hey, this is a major story moment from our movie. It has the look and the feel and maybe even the humor that our piece is meant to have. So these movie moment paintings are by Tim Lamb and Richard Daskis, and they're so fantastic. There's just such great humor in these. This is for Monsters vs. Aliens, these couple of pieces. I just love this piece. A great piece by Richard Daskis. It's so comic and so well put together. Okay, so from there we can move into prop design, because as I mentioned earlier, every little tiny thing that appears in an animated movie or an entertainment art project has to be designed by somebody, even if it's a pebble the main character kicks. And so prop design is very important to get the design, the color, and the texture of each piece of material. So note the reference of the context, which character holds that, some photo reference, and careful design work here in design for How to Train Your Dragon. The boat from How to Train Your Dragon, and a breakdown on the various pieces for the different boat, the design work at the crest here. And there are designs on the sails of the boat. This whole thing flares into a sail, and so someone's got to design that. So here we have sail design. Final design of the homes where the characters live from How to Train Your Dragon. And someone has to design all of these defensive weapons that are manned in How to Train Your Dragon as they fight off the dragons, as the Vikings of the island of Berk try and protect their homeland as best they understand how, with these elaborate weapons. So Mel Zwyer here did just a fantastic job. He dreamed these up. He thought up, how are some gruesome ways that we can wipe out dragons, some big, heavy-handed, Viking, bold, masculine, heavy timber design. And so here's final design on these props. Kung Fu Panda. And just to give a little bit of variety, this is the cobbled together plane from Madagascar 2 that the penguins and the monkeys put together from pieces left over from a crashed airplane. Someone's got to figure that out. Someone's got to figure out how the parts all come together to create the final, and how that process works. So more prop design from Madagascar 2. Alright, which brings us into modeling. So let me show you how modelers can actually be an important part of the visual development process, because it is true that the modeling department is an entire and separate department. Once the art department works out final design, as I showed you, they put together a design package and hand that off to the other departments. And so the modeling department takes that package and creates those things in three-dimensional space. But how modeling also applies to us, to you and I in the art department, because a few of you out there, maybe many of you, more and more now, are working at becoming great modelers. So modeling has also become an important part of the visual development pipeline. So how that works is like this. These are sketches by Christian Schellewald for Kung Fu Panda. And then these sketches are handed off to a concept modeler. And the modeler turns around and creates that model during the design and development process. And now the artists have the luxury of taking that render. They have the luxury of taking this model, grabbing a frame capture of it, and then incorporate that into their illustrations. Because a good painter can do all this, but gosh, there's just not much time for it. And so that model is literally carried into a scene, and then the illustrator can use that model, paint over it, and create bring a style to it, bring color to it, bring atmosphere to it, and do a really great piece like this one from Kung Fu Panda. And I believe this was Ramon Zebach, the production designer from Kung Fu Panda, who did this piece. I believe that's who did the piece. Not 100% sure on that, but it sure is beautiful work and has some of the signature color that Ramon uses or inspires in the artists that work with him. Okay, so that's how you might apply any modeling skills that you have in the design and development process. So we've got, and let me just make sure I point it out before we move on, scene layout. And this is just to give you an idea of how all the parts fit together, because this is something that's separate from the art department. Once we have props created and modeled and composited together in the form of a three-dimensional set, now scene layout takes a stab at it. These are our cinematographers. These are the people who understand about trucking in, zooming in, pulling out, close-ups, long shots, about different camera lenses, because as you may well know, the software is designed to mimic different camera lenses as is done in live action film. These are the people who understand about all of that. They set up the shots, they set up the camera, they pick and choose how to handle these character moments. Now here's a way that you might be involved a little bit in that process as you go through the design and development process. This is a layout page that I did. This was I remember how tough this was. It took a long time because we had worked out some very specific illustrations. These are how we wanted final scenes to look. And so these were our sketches and illustrations, and then we had a rough model of the set done. So what I had to do was to do call-outs. Here's where the camera angle is. Zoom in, you can see it's not high res here, but you can see these little cameras doing call-outs with a listing on which scene they're for and showing which direction they're pointing to. So from this angle, here's this rock, that rock, and here's how they're positioned. This angle is what you'd get from this camera, and so forth. And so sometimes when you do a specific illustration, you'll need to go into the model and do call-outs and show which parts of the model are represented in the scene that you've created. Okay, so scene layout. Now we go to surfacing, because once you have your prop design done and it has been modeled, it goes to surfacing artists who are a separate department from the art department. And they go in and they'll take, for instance, sketches like this have been done. And then the art department shows specifically, breaking down exactly what colors and textures will fall on that design character. So this is art department work here. And then a page like this is handed off to the surfacing department, where they use their three-dimensional tools and they create three-dimensional rendering that has your color and your design and your texture work on it. They digitally and in a 3D format bring that to life. And now we come to a biggie. We come to the color and lighting keys. So I'll show you some examples here of color and lighting keys that have been done for different movies. This is meant, even though these are often loose, sometimes they're loose and quick, sometimes they're very tight depending on the needs of the production and depending on the preference of the art director. These are meant to be a representation of a final scene in the movie. If you could capture a still frame of the final movie, these are meant to represent what that would look like. These are handed to the lighting department. We'll go back and we'll take a look here. The lighting department takes a look at those, and then they set up their digital lights as best as possible to recreate what you have rendered in your color and lighting key. So an example from How to Train Your Dragon, an example of a color and lighting key from Kung Fu Panda. We'll just go through some examples here. Some of these being tighter and relying on pre-existing material. For instance, you may be given a gray frame render that has a material that's already been designed and you can paint over it and colorize it, as happened in this scene, or you may be doing it from scratch, as in this scene, just depending on what assets are available for you to use as a starting point. Don't worry, I'm glossing over this. We're going to go into a deep discussion on how color and lighting keys are handled and created later on in the class. Remember, this is just our pipeline overview to give you a taste and a representation of how all the pieces and parts fit together in your skill set in creating an animated project and concept artwork. So a few more examples of color and lighting keys from Kung Fu Panda. Gorgeous work, just absolutely beautiful. I can say that because I did not paint this piece. I wish I had. I wish I could sit here and pat myself on the back and talk about how great I was for doing this piece. But no, not my work. And just to show you a little bit of style change, here's a painted color key for Shrek. This is from Shrek 2. So you'll notice this has a little bit more of a painterly quality. It depends on the production, it depends on the team and the art director on how these things are handled. So speaking of painterly, this gets much more graphic, though beautifully rendered once again. This is a color and lighting key from Monsters vs. Aliens. And on this show, the direction was to be more graphic, more stylized, and still gorgeous work. I think this is a piece by Scott Wills, who was the art director on the show. So a couple of examples of a more stylized approach, beautifully done, from Monsters vs. Aliens. Okay, which brings us to the lighting department. We've mentioned the lighting department a couple of times and how they interact with the art department and what these people have to do. Hats off to them, because they've got to take the digital tools and not only mimic real life, have all the believability that happens in real world lighting, but they have to take your color and lighting key that establish not just believable lighting and color, but also storytelling moments. If you've done your job right in your color key painting, you've designed the color and light in such a way as to create a story moment. And that's what they have to recreate in the digital set. And so they have to take these kinds of tools, which I don't know about you, but it just makes me start to kind of panic just to see a frame by this. I hope you see this page. I hope you love it. I hope you are a great digital guy. For me, well, I like to stick to painting in Photoshop. But these people are able to take those tools and create final sets that have lighting like this. I really felt like the lighting for the final installment of the Shrek movies, Shrek Forever After, I thought the lighting just came out gorgeous. And even if Shrek 4 didn't happen to be your cup of tea, it wasn't maybe your kind of story, I'll still say this, and I'll absolutely stand on this as being true, that the lighting absolutely told the story the way that it was meant to be told. So here's a few examples of final lighting in these final frame captures from Shrek Forever After. And these are just like storybook moments. If we were flipping pages in a beautifully rendered story moment book, I feel like this is how the lighting and color would have been set up in these scenes. In fact, we're going to take a close look. This sequence of the movie, later on in the class when we get to lighting design, we're going to take a specific look at this moment in the movie, because this is a conspiracy. This is a clandestine, conspiratorial moment. And I felt like the lighting, after several passes, trying out different things, I felt the lighting really created that feel that lets you feel it at that gut emotional level, the kind of storytelling event that's happening here. Look at how that lighting is carefully set up to attract attention to the characterization, the character moment, and to drop out anything that might be a distraction. Just a perfectly set up lighting scene. And this is what the lighters have to do based on your color and lighting keys. So matte painting is also an important aspect. Sometimes an art department will handle matte painting themselves, but in the bigger studios like DreamWorks and Disney and some of the others, matte painting becomes its own department. I do miss the days back in the beginning. We as the art department got to do our own matte paintings as part of our own design and development process. But as the studio got big and as the studio took on numerous productions, the only way to keep matte painting consistent and organized, and as the digital tools became more complex and more sophisticated, the only way to make all of that complexity work was to make matte painting its own department and handle each show within that one department. So that's, even though there in some ways was a loss there, in the overall it was a gain and an absolute necessity for the pipeline to work, to make the matte painting department its own department. During my time, my 16 years at DreamWorks, that's how things shook out. But I did get to do some matte paintings. For instance, here's a matte painting from Shark Tale that I got to do on the show. Here's another one from Puss in Boots. When we did the DVD special, the follow-up 20-minute special for Puss in Boots, we got to handle our own matte paintings on that particular show. So this is one of the matte paintings I did that appears in that show. Which brings us to our final frame of this section. These are the skills that you have to develop for you to have a place in the entertainment industry. Exploration, character design, color scripting, location design, props, color and lighting keys, and maybe even some matte painting. Your concept art portfolio has to have a powerful representation of these skills. You have got to knock it out of the park. You've got to know what to do to be able to knock it out of the park. And so this introduction has served to show you what we're going to cover over the course of this class over the next 8 weeks now. So I want to launch you into a homework assignment that's going to get you started on this path and let us smoothly transition into the next skill set that we're going to cover. Okay, let's take a look.